Hey guys, Psycho Dude Horror here, and today we'll be reading Chapter 8 and possibly Chapter 9, depending on how long Chapter 8 is. But Chapter 8, most definitely, of My Tiny Town Just Got Put on Lockdown. It is created by Cryptic Nightmares on Reddit. He also has 2 books on Amazon. They are titled My Tiny Town Just Got Put on Lockdown and My Tiny Town Just Got Put on Lockdown Searching for a Way Out. So if you guys enjoy the story, then consider checking out the books and checking out Cryptic Nightmares on Reddit. And I'll leave all of that information in the description. So without further ado, let's begin the story. Stay scary. Day 24, Part 3. As we pulled into the parking lot of the Dick's Sporting Goods, my heart sank into my stomach with the sight of the condition of the building. A colossal hole into the building stood where the front entrance once had been. One corner of the building had completely collapsed, leaving bricks and rubble littering the ground. The building looked like it had been hit by a missile. Through the gaping holes in the building, I could see faintly that a few of the racks and shelves still stood and a few of the lights were flickering vigorously, but still on. I sat staring into the building with my wife. Like a conscience in my own head spoke the words that I was thinking. Do you think that's even worth it? Just as she said this, I saw a massive shadow move in the flickering of the lights, followed by a roar so loud the van shook. Izzy began to cry, and Addie yelled from the backseat, "Mommy, I don't like that moo-moo." The behemoth crashed through another part of the front of the store, causing the rest of the standing building to collapse down behind it. The beast was immense, 4 hooves the size of Volkswagens attached to a muscular, smooth-skinned giant redwood legs. It stood nearly as tall as the building itself, its skin dark gray, almost black, and its back was covered in rows of sharp spindlings, much larger but very similar to those of the lurkers. It did look vaguely like a bull in body shape, which is why I assumed that the 2-year-old thought it was a cow. A thick and muscular neck held up the massive nightmare I would call its head. Spiked mandibles like those from the spiders surrounded a huge gaping maw, filled the rows of teeth, each the length of my leg and just as thick. Just above its mouth were 4 vertical slits, which again I assume were the equivalent to nostrils. Enormous eyes that looked almost insectial stared at us in our vehicle. It had 3 long slits that ran the length of its neck, and with each roar would fill the air with the purple fog. Huge horns curled like a ram spouted from the sides of its head just above its eyes, gnarled and twisted and covered in a texture resembling the bark of a tree. The behemoth lowered its head just in front of our van and roared again, causing the very glass and windows to shake and crack. "Holy fuck!" I yelled as I mashed the gas pedal to the floor, and with tires squealing, the van took off. Since the giant beast had been so close, we drove under its head and between the 2 front legs before turning and speeding off away from the building. With a grace I wouldn't expect from the creature so big, it turned and gave chase. Grace and I panicked and began yelling back and forth at each other in terror. "Fuck, it's chasing us!" "I know, how fast is it?" "I don't know, just floor it." Is it gaining on us?" I said as I began to weave around abandoned cars trying to get back to the road and back out of town. "Yes, can you go any faster? What do we do?" "I have the pedal to the floor. This van can't just plow through all these cars." The giant creature followed closely behind us, trampling through cars as it ran. As it got closer, it lowered its head and ran into the back of the van, crushing the back hatch and sending sparks flying as the back end made contact with the pavement. "Mommy, I'm scared." Addie said through tears from the back. I know, Addie, it's gonna be okay. Trevin, what do we do? A million scenarios flooded my mind, yet none of them seemed like it would be effective. Suddenly, I remembered the other guns we had gotten from the gun shop. Given the size of the beast, I didn't think anything short of a nuke was gonna kill it, but maybe I could just slow it down so we could get away. Climb in the back and grab the two big guns and the ammo for them, I yelled, trying to sound as confident in my plan as possible. Load the shotgun, then we are going to have to switch places, and I'm going to try to shoot it from out of the side windows. By the time we had made it onto the main road, which meant fewer cars in the middle of the road, we were going to pick up speed better. The beast lowered its head and nudged the back of the van again, crushing the hatch in a little further. Which one's the shotgun? Grace yelled at me, scrambling over the center console to the back of the van. The long one that doesn't have a scope on it, I responded as I watched the needle in the speedometer climb now that we were on some sort of straightaway. Got it. How do I load it? Never mind. No time. Just grab it in the ammo and trade me seats. Grace set the gun in the ammo boxes behind the center console and hopped half into the passenger seat as I set the cruise control. She grabbed the wheel as I wiggled my way over the seat and into the back. Grace slid into the driver's position, clicked the cruise off, and floored the pedal. I grabbed the gun and a box of deer slugs. I quickly ripped the box open and shoved two of them into the loading tube. I unhooked Izzy's car seat and slid into the passenger seat. Sliding the side door open, the Colossal let out another roar and began to lower its head. I braced myself between the door jamb and the chair. I pumped the shotgun to load a shell and tried my best to take aim at the beast's eye from a bouncing and moving vehicle. I pulled the trigger as we hit a bump. My first shot missed, hitting the creature's horn. The impact from the slug caused the creature's head to jerk slightly in the direction of the impacted horn, but didn't slow the beast. I pumped again and fired a second time. This shot made contact with the center mass of the creature's head. I saw a small spurt of purplish blood as the bullet hit, as the beast slowed, but only for a second. I reached down and tore the box of double-aught buckshot cartridges open and loaded one, following it with another slug. I pumped the shotgun, loading the slug first and leaning out the open door again. My next shot missed the eye again, but hit just above its mouth next to the slits on its face. I saw the purplish blood spray as the slug made contact again. The behemoth slowed, but only for a second. Although it only slowed for a second each time, it gave us a second to slightly pull ahead. Shit! Grace yelled just as the van hit a big bump, and I saw a spider creature fly tumbling from underneath the back of the van. The engine of the van was roaring as Grace was trying to keep the van going as fast as possible, yet keep it on the road and avoid dangerous and various obstacles. I pumped the shotgun again, loading the buckshot into the chamber. The beast roared just as I fired. The large balls of the double-aught finally hit my target as it pierced the beast's eye. It lowered its head as I assumed in pain, as its head came towards the ground while I continued to run after its horns caught the pavement and caused it to tumble over in sort of a clumsy somersault. As we sped away from the behemoth and towards the outskirts of town, it stood back up and let out one final roar after us as it watched us drive away. I gathered the shells and put the gun and shell back in the back of the van after closing the sliding door. I moved Izzy's car seat back to her base and kissing her forehead before turning and doing the same to Addie. Addie responded to my kiss by saying with tears in her eyes, "I want to watch a movie." My nerves rattled. I just smiled and told her, "Okay," before climbing into the passenger seat. As we got on the interstate just outside town, Grace slowed the vehicle down to a more manageable speed given the limited visibility. We looked at each other with shock in our eyes. I put a random movie in the player for Addie and Grace as I sat in silence, both of us visibly shaken from the tense situation we had just narrowly escaped. "We need somewhere to sleep, and from the looks of it, a new vehicle," Grace said, finally breaking the silence and gesturing to the crushed back hatch and damage to the windshield. "Agreed. Place to stay first, then we'll worry about a new vehicle," I responded. "Hey, you remember that old farmhouse just off the interstate you always point to? What do you say we give it a shot? It seems far enough from the town to be left alone is what I'm guessing. Plus, it's kind of close to the interstate, so we can bug out quickly. The options is there. Okay, it should be up here and a couple miles to the right. I I always point to it, but I'm not quite sure how to actually get to it, she said. I'm sure we can figure it out, but I think that's going to be a pretty safe bet as far as options go, I replied, looking out the side window into the fog. As we got further out of town, the fog was still there, but seemed to be much less dense, and it made me realize that it was all coming from the creatures. Maybe it was some form of terraforming, but it didn't seem like it actually changed much. The fog didn't seem to have any effect on the plants, and I didn't notice any difference in my breathing as I walked through it. The thoughts just brought me to one umbrella question of what is its purpose? What what is what's purpose? Grace said as she glanced over at me. Huh? Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I said that out loud. I was just thinking about the fog and what purpose it may serve to these creatures, I responded. The bigger beast seemed to release it into the air, but I can't figure out why or what it does for them. If anything, I guess. Oh, okay, she said as she turned off the interstate at an off-ramp into the vicinity of the farmhouse. We're going to try and test a few back roads until we finally figure out which one leads to the house. I nodded. We tried a few roads and had to backtrack a few times, being able to see the farmhouse in the distance, but not being able to drive up to it. We finally found the right road and made our way to the driveway of the house. We both sat in the car staring out the window, moving our eyes from the farmhouse near the barn, then to the machine shed and back. I finally took the time to load the Desert Eagle, and without a word, Grace took the other gun, and we both got out of the van. We left it running and both crept to the house. Grace stood by the door as I entered first. Once I got into the room, she followed. After a final vision sweep of the yard, we both took different floors and searched. I took the second floor and Grace took the ground floor and the attached two-door garage. Woohoo! Grace called out, and I ran downstairs to see what had happened. I found Grace standing in the doorway of the garage. One vehicle was missing from the garage, but one remaining was a big GMC Daniele Vios SUV. I couldn't find anyone or any creatures upstairs, I said as we both looked at the vehicle. Me either, Grace replied. Well, it looks like we got lucky and fixed both of our problems with one stop, I said, motioning to the vehicle. Yeah, thank God. It was really long, crazy day. Let's grab the girls and Bodie and get settled in for the night. I'm tired, she said. Good idea, I responded as we both turned and made our way back to the van. We collected the kids and the dogs and went inside. The cupboard was still had plenty of food in them, and nothing really seemed out of place. This made me wonder if someone would be coming back to the house. However, as the day concluded and the darkness of night grew near, nobody came. We made a trip or two out to the van to grab random amenities. In the morning, I would search the barn and the machine shed, but for tonight, we would make use of the kitchen to cook and eat a decent meal. Then we all gathered in a master bedroom on the second floor, cuddled together in one big pile. With loaded guns next to our bed, we fell asleep. Hey guys, Psycho Dude Horror here. That was chapter 8. That was a very short chapter, so we are going to do chapter 9 as well. So yeah, if you guys are enjoying the story, leave a like and subscribe, and check out Cryptic Nightmares on Reddit, and check out his books on Amazon. All the links will be in the description. Let's continue to part 9. Stay scary. Day 26. It's been 2 days now in this farmhouse. As we woke up yesterday morning, we realized we had no actual plan of what to do or where to go next. I was sure nobody was coming back to the house because yesterday when I went on a search to the machine shed in the barn, I found the previous owner impaled on a pitchfork in the barn. It looked like he had fallen from the loft and landed on it. It seemed like he had been there a while. I told Grace what I found, and while the girls played with their few toys we had brought with us from the house, she helped me pull the pitchfork from him, and we buried him this morning behind the barn. We have yet to hear any screams or screeches since we arrived and claimed this house, so I think we may stay here for a few more days. It will be nice to soak up the little moments of peace among all this insanity. Day 28. We saw another car early this morning. We were all in the house just trying to do our best to relax and pretend things were somewhat normal when I hear Grace say, "Shh! Hey, do you hear that?" We sat in silence for a few seconds before I heard it. It was an engine. I ran to the window facing the interstate just in time to see a Jeep moving very quickly down the road. At first, I ran to the garage grabbing the keys to the SUV on the way. I burst the door, hitting the button from the garage door on my way past and getting into the vehicle. As I saw the truck, I paused. They will be long gone by the time I hit the interstate after them, I think, then shut it back off and walked back inside. The sight of the Jeep going down the road didn't really help us in any way. However, it did let us know there were other survivors, other people, still out there dealing with all the same things we are. As I walked back in, Grace stopped me and asked what I had been planning. I responded telling her that I was going to try to flag or chase them down, but thought through and changed my mind once I got to the SUV. We let the girls play for a while as Grace and I talked about the Jeep and what it means to us. After talking about it for a few minutes, we came up to two conclusions. The first was that people in the Jeep were long gone by now anyway, and that after my encounter with the janitor at the rest stop, that it may be safer to keep to ourselves. "Mommy, Daddy, will you watch a movie with me?" Addie interrupted us as she came running into the room. Grace and I looked at each other for a second, realizing that our conversation was basically over anyway before I answered her. "Yes, of course, monkey butt. Let me see if we can find a way to make that happen." I got up and made my trip out to the van to gather some of the DVDs we had left in to keep Addie occupied on long drives, while Grace looked through the house for a way to play them. She quickly and easy found that there was a DVD player in the house's living room. While we sat and watched the movie with our daughters, we heard from the window a sound of what we haven't heard in a few days and dreaded hearing. It was the deep, guttural screech from a lurker. Grace and I shot each other looks of panic as we got up and ran around the house to make sure it was secure. Once we had made sure the house was sealed up, we grabbed the guns and kept them near as we finished watching Moana for the millionth time Addie had watched it. Luckily, other than a few more screeches throughout the night, we were able to crowd into the master bedroom again and safely do our best to fall asleep. Day 29, Part 1. "Daddy, look!" My eyes slowly drift open, noticing Addie pointing to the window in the second floor bedroom. Just as my eyes begin to focus, I notice something strange crawling on the glass. "What the fuck?" I mumble under my breath, followed by a much more audible, "Grace, wake up! Check that out!" Grace rolls over and looks toward the window, and we both sat in the bed in bewilderment, staring at what looks like some sort of gecko making its way across the window. Now, where we live, there are no native wild lizards of any sort. It gets too cold in the winter, and they can't survive around here except for maybe in a tank with a heat lamp as someone's pet. This one, however, was no normal lizard. It looked alien. 6 legs sprouting from the sides of its body, 3 on each side. The skin was translucent, revealing all its inside. All had a sort of purple swirling glow to them. It had 4 eyes, 2 on each side of its head. The short black spines ran in a line down its back. What is it with these creatures and spines? I thought to myself, and I got up to go inspect it closer from the side of the glass. Other than its odd look, it seemed rather harmless. It behaved like any other normal lizard its size would. It didn't seem aggressive. It didn't seem like it would be on the prowl or looking for bugs to eat. I will admit that the swirling purple glow of its insides were mesmerizing, but my close inspection of the alien lizard was suddenly cut short when I heard a faint rumble of another engine. I rushed over to the window facing the interstate again and looked out, maybe expecting to see the Jeep drive by again, but it was different. This time it was some sort of small SUV. It was too far away and the fog blurred my vision just enough that I couldn't really tell exactly what it was. It was heading in the same direction as the Jeep, a different group heading to the same place maybe. I asked myself, in the confines of my own head. Hey, what do you say we go investigate off in that direction? This is the second car we've seen going that way. Do you think there may be they know something that we don't? I said, looking over at Grace while she handed Addie a small package of mini donuts for breakfast. I don't know. I think it's safe here for the time being, and we have plenty of food to last us a few more days, she replied. Okay, that sounds good enough for me. But eventually we are going to need find somewhere to resupply ourselves, and when we do, I think we should follow the direction of the other cars. I'm going to move the stuff from the van to the SUV, so we don't have to later, I said as I headed towards the outside door of the van. I walked outside, letting Bodhi come with me so he can do his morning business. I made multiple trips hauling all of our goods and supplies and guns from the van into the house, to the garage, and into the SUV. On my final trip out to grab the sleeping bags and the last of the food I gathered on all my arms, as I walked a few steps toward the house, I paused, noticing that Bodhi was staring off behind me, and had lowered his head. He was growling at something. After a few seconds looking and listening, trying to figure out what he was growling at, I stared back at the door for a much more hurried pace, yelling, "Bodhi, come! Behind me!" He obeyed and trotted behind me and through the door to the house. As I closed the door behind me, Bodhi stayed at it and began to growl again. When I turned to look back at the door, I saw 3 of the spider creatures emerge from the field at the edge of the yard. They all skittered up to the van and began crawling all over it, doing what seemed like trying to find a way inside. One of them let out a scream, and Grace came to the back door and stood next to me. "Shh! Quiet, boy," I said to Bodhi as we watched the creatures swarm the van. They began to strike at the windows and eventually broke one, crawling inside. "Holy shit! Are they looking for us?" Grace said as she watched. "Yeah, I think our little sanctuary here in this house has just been cut short," I said to her as I turned and made our way to the garage, putting the remainder of our stuff from the van into our new vehicle. When I came back, Grace and Bodhi were quietly watching the spiders as they crawled all over the van, inside and out. "Where are the girls?" I asked. "In the other room. Izzy is just crawling around and exploring, and Addie is playing with her tablet," Grace replied. "I think we need to get in the..." I began to say as a blood-curdling screech pierced the air and 2 lurkers jumped from the field into the yard and began looking around. "Shit," I said slowly, realizing that the situation was getting worse by the second. "How far to the next town?" "Not sure. 10-15 miles maybe," I whispered back. "We need to get in the car and go before they start breaking into the house." "Okay, let's hurry. Let me grab the girls and we'll get loaded up." We both quietly rushed into the other room and scooped up the girls. I moved the car seats over to the SUV, but didn't have them strapped in yet. We grabbed what we had brought into the house and what few things from the cupboard we could quickly grab. Each of us took our guns and rushed to the garage with loaded arms. Grace kept the girls quiet, and Bodhi followed me around the SUV, watching me as I strapped the car seats in as fast as I could. Addie's seat was first, and she began to climb her way into it as soon as I was done. Grace strapped her in while I got the base for the car seat strapped in, and we clicked Izzy's car seat into it. Bodhi jumped in from the back and made his way to the seats over all of our supplies. Just as I clicked the car seats into the base, we heard a window shatter coming from the outside garage they had made into the house. Grace and I jumped into the vehicle, and just before I hit the button to the garage door, I stopped. Keys, I said, looking at Grace. I looked out the window towards the door to the house and took a deep breath. Here we go, I thought, as I grabbed my gun and opened the door, getting out. Luckily, the keys were just on the counter in the next room. Unluckily, I didn't know how many of the creatures were in the house or where they were. I stood by the door, breathing heavily in anticipation. I took a deep breath. Then, just as I was about to swing the door wide open and blast my way into the room, I stopped. What are you thinking? That's how you're going to get yourself killed, I thought to myself, and instead I slowly cracked the door open, peering through the slit so I had an idea of where my targets were. Good job, Trevin. Much smarter, my brain said to me. Through the crack, I saw one of the lurkers had just walked out of the room, and there were 2 spiders in the kitchen, and one of them happened to be standing on the counter right next to the keys. I looked back at Grace through the windshield and smiled before I opened the door and lifted the gun. There's a reason they call it a hand cannon. The first shot was a direct hit on the spider on the counter next to the keys. The creature essentially exploded in a purple gooey mist. The viscerary as a 50 cal bullet made contact. It also nearly broke my wrist as the gun kicked with such force. 2 hands, Trevin, 2 hands, I thought as I raised my other hand to handle the gun. Quickly, I aimed at the other 2 spiders carefully to focus on my shot, without making eye contact with the creatures. Second shot, another direct hit. Another cloud of exploded spider. I took 3 steps into the room and ducked past the doorway as a lurker lunged for me. It barely missed me and collided with the wall before dropping to the ground and turning to me. Still with no clues as how these creatures navigate with no eyes, I spin behind me, raise the gun to the lurker. As the lids on his face slide open and begin, needles poised to strike at me. I fire. Third shot. It was a miss, kind of. Hit the creature's left horn and blew it off, sending jagged shards of horn into the air. I re-aim from the recoil and fire again. 4th shot, almost perfect shot right in the middle of the beast's head, just as it began to leap at me. The impact from the gun's bullet decimated the creature's head and it popped like a balloon. Holy shit, I love this gun, I thought to myself as I sprinted for the keys. As I grabbed the keys, I turned back around and headed back to the door to the garage. A scream came from the room next to me as a 3rd spider skidded into the room. With keys in one hand, I would again have to shoot this thing one-handed. I quickly raised the gun to shoot 5th shot. I missed most of the spider, but I did blow up the 3 legs on one side and took a good chunk of its side out. Purple blood flew everywhere as the spider spun out back into another room on the floor. Not sure where the other lurkers was. I hurried toward the door. I only had 2 shots left in this gun and we needed to get the hell out of here. As I pushed through the door to the garage, I felt talons dig into my back as I was knocked to the ground. I heard Grace scream from the car as I reached back and fired blindly over my shoulder trying to hit the creature. I missed the lurker but caused it to jump off of me enough to let me roll over just as it dove on top of me again. This time the talon digging into my chest as I aimed the gun up and shot my final bullet to the creature's chest. Its ribcage exploded, covering me with blood and bits of organ, as what remained of the lurker slumped down on top of me. The strange purple stings as it falls into my wounds. The recoil from the pistol at that odd angle and the beast's body on top of me. And scrambling to my feet, I ran to pick up the gun and the keys I had dropped when I was first struck. Covered in all sorts of things I didn't want to mention, I climbed into the driver's seat and started the vehicle. I'll be fine, I say to Grace as the engine of the big SUV roars to life before she can even ask the question. It's not very deep. She nods with a look of concern in her eyes as she hits the button for the garage door. Tension rises as we sit and wait for the door to move fully up so I can back out of the garage. Once it does, I put the vehicle in reverse and quickly floor it out of the garage. When I stop the shift to drive, I see more creatures emerge from the field and we notice the booming footsteps before the shadow of the behemoth forms along the field in fog. Relentless bastards, I say out loud as I hit the gas and speed away from the soon-to-be overrun farmhouse and towards the interstate. As As soon as the tires leave the driveway onto the road, a loud roar cracks across the sky from the behemoth. After a few roads and turns it took to get us back to the interstate, we headed towards the next small town. I embraced my gun and asked her to reload it while I drive. Who knows what we'll have to deal with next, and I wanted to be ready. Hey guys, Psycho Dude Horror here. Thank you for listening to tonight's story. If you guys did enjoy it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And remember to visit the links in the description to support Cryptic Nightmares, the author of this story. And go check out his books on Amazon. My Tiny Town just got put on lockdown. And My Tiny Town just got put on lockdown, searching for a way out. So again, if you guys did enjoy, leave a like and subscribe and comment what the scariest part of today's story was. And I shall see you guys in the next story. Stay scared.